My name is Brooke Werner, and today I'm going to be presenting over ADHD, what it is, where it stems from, different treatments for it, and how we as educators should treat our students who may have ADHD and how their learning may become different from their peers. First things first, what is ADHD? Well, let's look at it as an acronym first and decide what that means. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And just as the name implies, it really comes from a hyperactivity in a child. They can't sit still, they have trouble focusing. It's a very common mental disorder, and the people who are diagnosed are usually children, or it's really diagnosed at a young age, usually. ADHD is actually not considered to be a learning disability. It is under the category of other health impaired, and it's not under specific learning disabilities. However, students who have ADHD are still eligible to receive special education services if needed. There are several different types of ADHD. The CDA lists 3 types based around whether the student is more hyperactive or more impulsive, less attentive. It really just depends on each student's scenario, and you can't stereotype all students with ADHD. It's a case-by-case basis, which includes how you should teach them as well. How is ADHD diagnosed? As teachers, we sometimes feel overwhelmed by the subject of how many different students there are in our class. And of course, it may not seem like our place to make these big decisions of whether a student has ADHD or any other specific disorder or disease. However, most students who have ADHD have been diagnosed by teachers and then a professional afterwards. The reason being because a teacher spends so much time with their students and they are tracking their progress through tests, through assignments. They can physically see if a student is having trouble focusing or paying attention or just gathering the material in their head. They can see that they are falling behind in the classroom, which is great because it allows us to realize when our students may need more help. Healthcare providers use the guidelines in the American Psychiatric Association's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual 5th edition. So there are specific diagnostic steps that you have to take to decide if a student has ADHD or just some other condition, maybe one not quite so severe. After all, it does have to be 6 or more symptoms of inattention for children up to age 16 years or 5 or more for adolescents aged 17 years and older. It can also be found in adults. You can be diagnosed late in your life, and you can also develop it later in your life. Symptoms have been present for at least 6 months. This is important because obviously you want to make sure that this is a reoccurring thing that really gets in the way of a child's structure of their life. It has to greatly affect their life at home, their education, in order for it to be designated as a disorder. It also has to be present in 2 or more settings, which normally means if it's present at school but not at home, it might not be ADHD because ADHD is something that's very continuous. You experience it in all different settings. What to look out for. These are the specific symptoms that a student with ADHD might have. It really affects their focus, their attention, and their behavior, which can make learning very challenging because they might not want to sit and listen to a lecture. They might not be interested in the material, and it's just a lot harder for them to sit down and learn. The way I see it is if I was to pick up a book on mechanics. My boyfriend is a mechanic, and he likes to talk about mechanics quite a bit. I'm completely clueless on mechanics, so I just don't have the interest to learn about it. So if I had a 600-page book or something sitting in front of me, it would take a lot of effort for me to read that. For a person with ADHD, it could be something as simple as math or reading or English, and it just feels like that 600-page book is something that they really aren't interested in, that they are being asked to read, and it's very difficult for them. How should teachers observe and teach students with ADHD? Well, obviously there is a difference in learning. You can't just teach a student who has ADHD the same way that you would other students in your general education program. It is a new challenge to teach these kind of students, but it's important not to get frustrated at the student or at yourself, because when difficult tasks come around, there is going to be failures, and we just have to pick ourselves back up and just continue to do what we can for the student to achieve as best as they can to their ability. We also have to keep in mind that it is difficult for a child to cope with ADHD. We also have to realize that students might be taking medication that might give them mood swings. They might become overwhelmed or depressed with the situation. We don't know how their home life is normally, and we can't change that. So we have to be very generous, very, emotionally connected to our students to understand how they are feeling so that we can treat them the way that they deserve to be treated while we're educating them. All cases are different, and they should be treated differently, of course. And another interesting fact that I found while researching is that symptoms in boys may sometimes be different than symptoms in girls. So while boys tend to act out and be super hyperactive and aggressive with ADHD, it's very easy to see. It might be a bit more difficult to notice in girls because instead they might become more withdrawn, more anxious, they might have low self-esteem, and they might be more daydreamy when they cannot focus or sit still. These are symptoms that connect with a bunch of different disorders, though, so it is very fair to check up on that, but we shouldn't, just because boys are more common to get ADHD than girls, we shouldn't narrow out that girls can definitely get it and that their symptoms may look a little bit different, so we have to watch out for both. A successful program for children with ADHD integrates the following three components. That is accommodations, instruction, and intervention, which is something we have been talking about a lot in this class, which is great. Accommodations is doing what you can to make the student feel comfortable in the classroom and able to learn. The instruction methods are on you. Are you teaching this kid to the best of your ability, doing what you can to fit their needs? An intervention is how you head off behaviors that disrupt concentration or distract other students. A student with ADHD, they could be prone to outbreaks. It can be quite distracting, and it's important that as a teacher you don't, add to the distraction. You need to be able to handle it in a very focused and respectful way. You have to calm down the student quite quickly just so that you don't disrupt the class and disrupt other students that are trying to learn. Some other ways that a teacher can help teach a student with ADHD is how they seat them in the classroom, placing them in less distractive areas or more interesting areas that really gets them excited to learn. The way they deliver their information should be interesting, of course, and just try to take in all the different students' methods of learning. Make sure that they change up their ways of delivery so that they can hit all students. The work that the student might do might have to be more grasping. It might be different from the other classmates. And their organization. A student with ADHD probably should deserve a very organized classroom so that they aren't too distracted by things that aren't important while you're learning. Here are some more ADHD facts to help us understand the disorder. 6.4 million American children aged 4 to 17 have been diagnosed. This is a very large number. It's a very common disorder. So it's very important for us educators to be familiar with it so that when we run into it, we're not clueless or think that it's more serious than it is. There's no reason to overreact, but there is some changes that need to be made to the classroom in order to support this child and help them achieve. The average age of diagnosis is 7 years old, and symptoms usually start between ages 3 and 6, which is like the previous fact that normally people with ADHD are diagnosed at a very young age because the symptoms become present fairly early in life. Another interesting fact is that ADHD is actually rising. The reasons are varied for this, but one of the main reasons is the launch of technology. It is definitely changing the social aspect of our world. It's changed patience, having everything at the touch of your hand, and it's changed learning even. Being able to look up answers and just kind of having all this information just in one little screen is quite difficult for students to grasp that education is still alive and that we still need to go to school, we still need to read textbooks, we still need to focus on our work, and we can't have everything handed to us. Here's my source citation. Another thing that I wanted to add, because I didn't mention it, we did watch a video where instead of calling ADHD a hyperactive disorder, it's actually more of a focus difference. I like that word better because it does show that instead of treating it like a disorder, we should treat it as a learning difference. It's nothing bad, and it's nothing that the student can do to change themselves. It's just simply something that they have to live with, and we can make the best of it if we really try. So I found this module very interesting, and I had fun creating this presentation. I love making PowerPoints. And finding and reading all this information was very interesting because I really didn't know very much about ADHD before I created this PowerPoint. So I hope you all enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good weekend and 4th of July.